Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event. Fight fans worldwide, you've tuned into the #1 undisputed boxing podcast today. This is the Boxing Breakdown. Now, your heavy-handed, hard-hitting host, Mark Roxey.
What's up, boxing fans and friends? Welcome to another episode of the Boxing Breakdown, and I'm your host, Mark Roxey, and I'm super pumped to have you here today. It's a blessing to be alive another day, watch another episode of boxing, and listening to the Boxing Breakdown right now, right? So I want to thank you for listening to the Boxing Breakdown. And if you like the episodes and you like what I'm doing, if you could please share this with others, it would be super amazing. And it will go a long way. We want to grow our following, and we want to make sure we can get this information out to our boxing community and really just have a real positive podcast that you can listen on your way to work or on your way, while you're at work, or even when you're chilling out in your house. So again, welcome and thanks for being with me tonight. So I wanted to just lay out a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And today I have on my list to discuss sanctioning bodies. So this particular podcast is going to be geared toward creating a little more depth of understanding about sanctioning bodies and what they are. So I'm going to start off by just giving you a little bit of background on what a sanctioning body is. And so since at least John L. Sullivan in the late 19th century, there have been world champions in professional boxing, right? The first of the current organizations to award a world title was, get this, the World Boxing Association, otherwise known as the WBA. Back then, they were known as the National Boxing Association. The acronym is NBA. When it sanctioned its first fight, it was way back in 1921 between Jack Dempsey and George Carpenter for the World Heavyweight Championship of the world. There are now 4 or 5 sanctioning bodies in professional boxing, and the official rules and regulations of the World Boxing Association, WBA, the World Boxing Council, WBC, the International Federation, which is known as the IBF, and the World Boxing Organization, which is known as the WBO. They all recognize each other in their rankings and title unification rules. Each of these organizations sanction and regulate championship bouts and award world titles. American Boxing Magazine, otherwise known as The Ring, began awarding world titles way back in 1922. There are 17 weight divisions in professional boxing. To compete in a division, a boxer's weight must not exceed the upper level, the upper limit. Manny Pacquiao has won world championships in 8 different weight divisions. He's getting ready to actually compete for his 9th weight division. He's going to go down in the record books, but that's a whole other podcast. He's basically fought in more weight divisions than any other boxer. But I also would be remiss not to mention the Klitschko brothers, Vitaly and Vladimir. They held all 4 major titles in the heavyweight division from 2011 all the way until 2013. They were the first brothers to hold versions of the heavyweight championship at the same time. And finally, Joe Louis holds the record of being the longest reigning world champion in the history of boxing. For those of you that don't know about Joe Louis, y'all should check him out. Joe Louis, man, everybody knows who Joe Louis is, but read up on Joe Louis. He's the bomb diggity. Amazing. So today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to delve into sanctioning bodies and what that is and how it works. And so my special guest is going to be Jeremy Lanza. He's the president of the American Boxing Federation, and he is based out of Tampa, Florida. Jeremy started his professional boxing career in 1998 with BoxRec, the official record-keeping website for the world of boxing. As the chief editor for the Philippines, he went on to excel in his role, eventually landing editorship within Southeast Asia and the continent of Africa. Jeremy has assisted numerous national boxing commissions with both their establishment and their processes that they implement to govern over professional boxing. Through Jeremy's many years at BoxRec, he gained recognition and a strong foothold by networking with acclaimed promoters, managers, fighters, national boxing commissions, and stakeholders around the world. This led to executive involvement as vice president of a major world boxing sanctioning body. And then moving on to the rebranding of the U.S. Mid-America title that was based in St. Paul, Minnesota, an organization that was established in 1982 into the now recognized sanctioning body, the American Boxing Federation, otherwise known as the ABF. The ABF was established on February 20th, 2018. Mr. Lanza is currently the president of the ABF. It's basically under his leadership, it's been a tremendous success, and they've achieved over 70 title fights since its inauguration on April 7th, 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the program Mr. Jeremy Lanza, president of the American Boxing Federation. What's up, what's up, what's up?
What's up, Mark?
What's up, Jeremy? What's going on?
How are things?
Oh, everything's good. Everything's super good. I'm just, we're still over here in Coronaville, and I'm sure you are too, right?
Yeah, I'm in Tampa, so
yeah,
getting pretty heavy over here.
So how's it going in Florida?
It's pretty crazy. It's a different perspective than the rest of the country, so I don't know if we're ever going to lock down again, but hopefully things will improve soon, so we can all get our lives back in order.
For sure. Yeah, I know. I mean, I had no idea. I had actually, I was working a corner for a fighter for a fight that was scheduled for June 26th out there in Miami, and they canceled the fight. So I was pretty bummed about that. And I think they may have moved the location, or they're trying to move the location to Mississippi, but who knows what's going to happen. I just pray for the folks out there in Florida. Shout out to our people in Florida. Stay strong.
Right.
And how's your family doing? How's Soren? How's Liam and Jameson? How's your kids? You got those 3 boys.
Yeah, I've got a 4-year-old Jameson. I've got a 10-year-old Liam and 22-year-old Soren.
For sure.
Soren actually, his roommate, we just found out his roommate's got coronavirus. So luckily I haven't been around him the past couple of weeks. But he's doing okay. I think he's asymptomatic. Yeah. But, this is the new reality, I think, in our sport for now at least. And I think that we're going to figure this out, as far as having fight cards. I know that I talked to a lot of people. And one of the things that a couple of the commissions, actually, I talked to 2 commissioners last week, and both of them kind of talked to me about it a little bit. And what they're looking to do is you fly out to the city, you go to something like LabCorp, where you will take your rapid results test for coronavirus. And from there, you're going to go right to the hotel. You stay in the hotel the entire time. So you'll be fighting in the ballroom, using the gym, using the food facilities.
Right.
There may be other tests that you take. You fight, and then you go home. So, it appears that we all realize that this might be a little longer than we expected. And it seems like I believe that, there's no stopping us. We're gonna continue to make strides.
Oh, Jeremy, you're 100% right. And by the way, I just wanted to make sure I sent my regards to Dawn as well. Dawn, shout out Dawn Lanza, your wife. How's she doing?
Yeah, she's good. She's good. She's with the 4-year-old. So
yeah,
a 4-year-old will keep you busy.
Well, on that point that you were just making, my the folks over at Indio's Boxing in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, just took Martino Jules Jr. out to fight in Vegas. So they just left a couple of days ago, and I'm proud to report that the boys from Indio Boxing brought home the W. They actually won last night on a top rank card. Right. It was fantastic. Wow. Yeah, it was great. And so shout out to Team Jules and, Louis Melendez and Indio. Yeah, they did a fantastic job, man. So, but they were, like you said, they flew out. They actually flew from Philadelphia out to Chicago and then out to Las Vegas. And then, like you said, they were all quarantined. And then sure enough, they fought and boom. I think they spent today in Vegas, but they're on their way back, So nice. It's crazy, but it's crazy how different things are. Even the weigh-ins were quite peculiar. I mean, we're not the normal, things. And if the listeners out there
washing ring ropes and scrubbing down ring aprons and a lot of things like that. I think real quick, one thing I was thinking about this is we all need to get in the habit of washing our hands maybe twice an hour. Sounds excessive, but if you're outside of your house or you're doing anything in the public, it's just to, I guess, have hand sanitizer and things like that. We have to have new habits to keep ourselves, clean and hopefully protect ourselves from this. So
right, no, for sure, and I think you can't be clean or safe enough. You really have to be diligent about it. I think we were talking earlier, and you had mentioned that there were a couple of fighters that, without giving names, of course, for protection, of their privacy, but there were some fighters that were going to fight on a card, and apparently it didn't work out, right? Like they came out with coronavirus.
Yeah. Yep. That was actually today.
Wow.
So it's actually it's hitting home.
Yeah.
But they're asymptomatic, which I don't think we thoroughly understand everything about this. We just don't want to pass it on to somebody who could have a very difficult time with it.
Yeah. Did you, by any chance, were you able to listen to the cast? I did a podcast a couple weeks ago with the doctor, Andrew Foy.
Andrew Foy, yeah.
Yeah, did you get a chance to hear that? He has an interesting perspective. If you didn't, check that one out. Because it's
I did hear it. It was very good.
Yeah. It was a whole different take on asymptomatic and just coronavirus in general.
There's some good questions.
Yeah.
There's some good questions out there, and I think a lot of us try to be the experts.
Yeah.
I don't have a political viewpoint. I'm on both sides of the fence, so I try to. I'm different than anybody else.
Yeah.
So I have my own political viewpoints, which don't fall in line with one side or the other. So.
All right. I'd expect nothing less from you.
You have to really understand what you're talking about. If you're going to have a specific viewpoint other than what you hear, you have to really understand it. And Dr. Foy obviously has a deeper grasp than a lot of us.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, he added so much insight to a lot of the fighters out there that listen to the cast. He was just really, really informative and helpful, and it was a great cast. But again, we're here because I got all these fans and all these listeners out there in Boxing Breakdown land, and they all want to know, like, what, well, actually, they don't want to know, but they're gonna know. I want to know, and I thought it would be a great cast to have you on, and thank you for being here. But I really wanted to just get into like sanctioning bodies and what they are and how they work, because I think a lot of people don't really get it. They don't really understand. It's kind of like an area of the sport that just kind of exists, and it exists way up at the top, and not a lot of people know what it is. So
sure.
Well, if we can delve into that today, that would be fantastic. And what I wanted to really start off with was, like, how did you get into boxing? Who and or what was your inspiration for boxing? And we'll be right back after these messages. Breakdown listeners, I sure hope you're enjoying this podcast today. Please be sure to share it with your friends and family. Download and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and anywhere downloads are offered. Please take a moment, if you enjoy this podcast, and consider making a small donation at patreon.com/theboxingbreakdown. And now, back to our broadcast.
Sure. And my name is Jeremy Lance. I'm the president of the American Boxing Federation. So I'll go over my inspiration for boxing and explain briefly my journey on going from a kid watching boxing on TV to being the president of the most active regional sanctioning body in the Americas, the American Boxing Federation. So growing up, I had a friend whose dad would take us to the fights, and I would get picked up by my friend and his dad, and we would plot out the day. And at the time, boxing was extremely popular, as Mike Tyson was the heavyweight champion at the time. And whenever the dad would look at the sports section of the newspaper to see if there was a boxing match going on in town, he would say, let's see if there's a title fight on the card. And if there was, then we would go to the local fight card in Tampa. That's where I was born and raised,
right,
and still reside.
Wow.
Watching fights on Wide World of Sports. I remember watching afternoon title fights on ABC's Wide World of Sports. There were so many great boxers in the early 80s. You had George Foreman, Mike Tyson, Michael Carbajal, Sugar Ray Leonard, and, a lot of other really prolific boxers.
Right.
Boxing pay-per-view would mean that the neighbors were watching the fights and hosting parties where everybody would split the cost of a closed-circuit event. And, of course, as kids, we were always playing the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out constantly.
Yeah, I remember that game.
So I never got very far, and I didn't do very well. King Hippo, I think, was the furthest I ever got. But for me, Mark, boxing was as important in the American psyche as baseball is as America's pastime. It's just surrounded by my grandfather's brother actually had a reel-to-reel collection of Joe Louis fights.
Wow.
And my grandfather would talk about listening to the fights in the late 30s and 40s on the radio. So he would always talk to us about that. As a teen, I remember watching the USA Mid-America title being contested on USA Tuesday Night Fight.
Oh, yeah.
And little did I realize that I would be in a position to grow that particular brand into the American Boxing Federation some 30 years later.
What? Wow.
So, it's always interesting that when you break down a lot of your experiences in your youth, the clues are always there on why you end up gravitating towards things later in life.
Yeah, you know what? You hit the nail right on the head, because a lot of people don't realize that what happens in those first years, those beginning years, really do lay out like the course of your life. People don't really get the gravity of that, how powerful that really is. I have a similar story. I used to sit on the lap. I think I shared this in one of the earlier podcasts. I used to sit on my Grandpa Gonzalez, Paco Gonzalez in Puerto Rico, and we used to sit with a black and white TV and watch boxing all day long. Like that's all he was like, I am just boxing. And that had such a profound impact in my life in the early days. And I'm talking about like 5, 6 years old, 7 years old.
Right.
You know, how impactful those early years can be, you know? So exactly. So
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no. Go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
Yeah. So basically, so that's kind of how I grew up, and boxing just was really, really important. Of course, like I said, Mike Tyson's Punch Out was really, really important. And Mike Tyson, Michael Jackson, those were the two icons at the time, and everybody talked about that all the time. One minute you want to be Michael Jackson, the next minute you want to be tough and be like Mike Tyson. You know?
Yeah. Or be both.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful time for me to grow up and experience all of that. And I grew up believing that the whole world gravitated around boxing.
Right.
Whether it did or not, I didn't know, but it did for me.
Well, and back then, listen, Jeremy, back then, boxing was, you know, very similar to baseball. It was it was America's sport. I mean, boxing was huge. You know, people nowadays, they don't recognize how huge boxing really was back in the day, you know? So how did
it's my first, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how did you get into the profession of boxing? Like, what was your first experiences in, as a professional person in the boxing industry?
Well, my first position in boxing was with the official boxing record keeper, BoxRec.com, which is now aligned with the Association of Boxing Commissions.
Sure.
In the mid-'90s, I was married to my first wife, who was a Filipina.
Right.
And her family also enjoyed watching boxing occasionally. This, of course, was a time when Manny Pacquiao was moving up in the ranks. When I took a look for the first time at BoxRec.com, I remember that moment. You know, when I first saw that website for the very first time, and I pulled up Manny Pacquiao's record. And I noticed that many of the boxers he faced appeared to be missing many of their fights on the site. So I saw this as a problem that I had to solve. So I pursued BoxRec, and as well as many prominent Philippine boxing writers like Saban Lagumbe and Rene Danseco and people like this, who are very prominent in the Philippines, who knew Pacquiao very well. And I would email them a lot, and they probably didn't appreciate it that too much.
Yeah, sure.
So I eventually, eventually I was able to get a role as a member of BoxRec, as editor of the Philippines. And I eventually had a great relationship with the Philippine Boxing Commission, the Games and Amusement Board in Manila.
Right.
And would receive their official results by email regularly. And being kind of a statistical person that I am, it gave me a lot of joy to be able to fill in these results, the missing results, and to be a major contributor to boxing history.
Wow.
So I started working with boxing commissions, which I remember first time I was probably 21 years old. I started doing this about 1998. I guess that was 22 years ago.
Wow.
And I remember how nervous I was talking to a commission, being a kid at that time of about 21, 22 years old. Prior to my work with BoxRec, I was also a contributor for a website called PhilippineBoxing.com.
Okay.
Where I was a writer going back to around 1996, where I got my start in the business. So, we would watch the videotapes of boxing matches from the Philippines that were in VHS tapes that was sent from the Philippines. And everything is in Tagalog. And I was really interested in this. And then I'd write articles about fights that I saw. And so I was a kid at that point. And, I felt pretty cool that I was writing stuff for a website at that point. Websites are, this was 2 years into the internet. So I thought that was a real big deal. And then with BoxRec, I felt like a boxing historian. So I got to tell you that my job at BoxRec has been it was a very fulfilling 20 years that I worked with BoxRec.
20 years?
20 years,
wow.
Sitting at the bar, drinking beer, filling in missing boxing results from boxers from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, all these former boxers from the Philippines. That's kind of how I got my start. And it felt, for me, it was very, very rewarding because I felt like I was filling in the historical record that nobody knew about,
right.
and nobody would know about.
And imagine if you're that boxer and you see your name show up like in the history books, right?
Actually,
profound.
Facebook came out shortly thereafter, and I would actually reach out to these guys and say, check out this website, boxrec.com. And they're like, what's that? And I'd go, no, like, those are all my fights. Oh my gosh. They're just in tears. You're so happy. No.
Yeah, what a contribution. I just want to acknowledge you for that. That's an incredible contribution to the sport of boxing, man. That's powerful.
Yeah, I spent probably 30 to 40 hours a week doing it for 20 years, easily.
Wow.
If not a lot more.
So how
3 or 4 in the morning some days.
So from there, how did you, all right, so you work for BoxRec.
Evolution.
Yeah, man. But how do you go from BoxRec into the ABF? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, so the most integral ingredient in my evolution has been the ability to constantly network. And this all began with my role with BoxRec, like we were talking about. My work with BoxRec gave me a great deal of satisfaction as I began to network with commissions, promoters, boxers, sanctioning bodies all over the world. And it led to my not only working with the Philippines in BoxRec, but also to helping China when they just began with their boxing program, making some strides in Thailand with their, they used to have their like 3K battery and all these other things on their names.
Right.
So I'm really pushing hard to get their legal name precedence over the 3K battery or whatever their managerial name was.
Right.
So you'll see that a lot of the Thai boxers now actually have their real names, and that was because I was very against it. So making strides in India, when India started, I was very involved with India, and I got them going with their commission, Singapore, Indonesia. And then with all of that, I had the granddaddy of them all for BoxRec, which was Africa.
Wow.
When I began my efforts with Africa, there were only a handful of African nations that were active in BoxRec at the time. But after a couple of years of networking with the movers and the shakers and these other boxing commissions that were not reported in BoxRec, we started to get Africa on the map.
Wow.
So I was talking, what I've come to realize is that, there's one person in the whole country that's really making it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that to be the case with Tanzania, Uganda, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, Zambia, and actually there's several others I can't think of off the top of my head.
So
all of those countries had one person that was really running the gamut.
Just like one person trying to keep records for all of the sport in that particular country. That's incredible.
It was one person not keeping records, one person that was promoting the sport. They're a promoter.
Gotcha.
They were a promoter. They would have a gym. They would have people in the gym. They would advertise boxing. They loved the sport of boxing. And they would throw shows. And for a very, very long time, for decades, those shows didn't count in BoxRec.
So just like one per country, or literally one per country?
Literally.
Wow.
Yeah, literally. There's probably one important person. There are other players in there, but we're talking the year 2002, 2003.
That's not that long ago.
What I learned is that there's just one person, one major promoter who had a gym, and he had some sponsors that would help pay for the event. And they'd throw events, but they're non-sanctioned events. And then they would start a commission.
Right.
They'd get some people involved to start a commission. And then they'd have their commission. So I would discuss I'm like, well, they're like, put my results in BoxRec. And I say, well, I can't. You don't have a commission supervising the events. So I would go over the organization of formulating commissions and things like that. And eventually, after a few years go by, all those countries I named had national boxing commissions, and we were able to go ahead and give them credence.
Wow!
So for me, that was really, really huge, because all those people in that country who are wanting to be in the boxing business were now able to take part, and they're part of the historical record. So we basically were able to evolve the sport of boxing to be more inclusive by utilizing video, and by the commissions putting fights on YouTube, and also the record keeping internally, and thus getting their fight cards put into BoxRec and into their historical record. So that ends my 20-year cycle with BoxRec, which got me talking to the commissions, the promoters, the boxers. And at this point, I feel like I was pretty well versed in my understanding things on a deeper level, worldwide, internationally. So that led to the American Boxing Federation. But before that, I'm just going to touch on how I went from being an editor for BoxRec to, I guess, transitioning to being the president of the American Boxing Federation.
Yeah, that's big. I want to hear that. I want to hear how. So you're basically analyzing data for BoxRec, and then you get into the ABF. Right.
So I had a vocal impairment and I still do, about 4 or 5 years ago, which made me rethink the sales job that I had. And I was really freaking out about it, as I didn't have my full voice for quite a few months. And this led me to looking outside the box. And I met somebody from France who was involved in an international sanctioning body. And together we started this organization, and I had the opportunity to progress the organization. And I was the vice president for a period of time. One of the greatest moments of my life, my boxing life, was that I was involved in the first female world title held in Sweden, which was an incredible experience in Örebro, Sweden, small town Sweden. And the girl who won is actually WBC world champion now, so that's pretty amazing.
Wow.
But I partnered with a renowned European matchmaker, Artan Verbika, very close friend of mine, and we are always working together to make title fights happen on the European side of the pond. So he's always reaching out to me. Who do you have in cruiserweight? I have an important fight in Italy. This is the purse, the number of rounds, and I'll look through my champions list, and I'll say I have an ABF champion ready to go over there. So networking is everything. So it was about that same time that I met Scott Holzman from Minnesota, who was involved with the USA Mid-America brand, which was an organization dating back to the early 1980s. And together we reimagined the USA Mid-America title and expanded it to encompass more than just the Midwest and formed the American Boxing Federation.
Right.
Scott and I became co-presidents for a period of time, and he had the opportunity to expand his abilities with matchmaking for a massive promoter in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up taking the reins as president, full president. And so I'm forever grateful to him.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing trajectory. Seriously, oh my goodness.
When you're out, when you have to go outside the box like that, I had lost my voice. I had bronchitis, and it was followed by pneumonia, and I was working 80 hours a week or more. I actually probably did closer to 95 hours a week.
And what was your sales job? That's what I want to know. What were you selling?
That's my big secret.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I've been working with the same company for 25 years.
Right.
On the side.
Yeah.
And so, that was basically, so I basically, what happened was something happened with my main vocal cord. So as I'm talking to you now, I'm not using my full main vocal cord, so I have to speak loudly to project. Otherwise, I have a very raspy sound in my voice.
Right.
So, but at the time, my voice would break, or I didn't have a voice for like 4 or 5 months. And, at the time I had 2 kids, and I was just, freaking out about it. And so I had to think outside the box. What am I going to do? And of course, boxing was part of my life, and I had to figure out, this before I got involved with sanctioning bodies. That's what really pushed me into that next tier, from BoxRec into working with sanctioning bodies was that situation. I wanted to see if I could do something that would really, this is an opportunity for me to pursue my passions. I always try to take my weaknesses and make them a strength.
Right. No, for sure. And then, so Jeremy, as a supervisor, right? Because can you just tell the folks out there, what does a supervisor do? Like, break it down for them. Most people listening in have no idea what a supervisor's role is at ringside or at any other time. Could you just share that with the listeners?
Absolutely. So, real quick, my first event as supervisor for the American Boxing Federation was in April of 2018 near Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it was there that I met my vice president, Claire Burke. She was one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met, with lots of energy and positivity. And she's really been a real dynamo for our organization.
Shout out Claire Burke. Shout out Claire Burke. And you know what? I got to get you on the cast. You're on my radar. I got you on my list, and we will be chatting, Claire Burke. Go ahead.
And
Sorry,
together we've encompassed over 70 title fights in basically 2 years throughout the USA. Wow. And I've also done title fights in Brazil 3 times, and Mexico. Since our inception, first title fight as the ABF, American Boxing Federation, April 7, 2018, we've had 71 title fights, which in the same amount of time, the WBC, which has the NABF title and the USNBC title,
right.
They did a total, those 2 titles combined, it's 65 titles.
Wow.
And then the WBA, which has the regional bodies, so the NABA for WBA, and then they also have the NABA Canada and NABA USA titles. They did 54 titles.
Wow.
The WBO, which has the NABO and the USBA, which is another body, actually, USBA, I believe it's IBF. Mm-hmm. Well, the WBO, NABO did 48 titles. The USBA, the IBF did 26 titles, and then the Universal Boxing Federation All-America title, 3 in 2.5 years.
Wow.
So me and Claire had a meeting. We were at a show together. I think I was in San Antonio, Texas, and we were sitting at a drinking facility. And, we decided to look at this data for the first time, and we had no idea. And that was, we couldn't believe it, that, that was how well things were going for us. But we have a lot of energy, so it's really not all that surprising. We have our official website, abfboxing.com, which contains our ratings and list of champions. We're also on Facebook. We abide by the Muhammad Ali Act and the guidelines of the Association of Boxing Commissions. And it's also great to have that, like we were talking, a strong alliance with BoxRec.com. All of our title fights are included on that website. BoxRec is like the almanac of boxing, the historical guide. It's really important to be a part of the historical record. And without BoxRec, boxing wouldn't be the same.
Oh, so, agreed with that, 100%.
So Claire and I are the main supervisors for the American Boxing Federation.
Yeah.
And we also have a representative in Mr. Harold Hunt, who you might know, who also supervises ABF title fights.
Oh, yeah. I know Harold. Are you kidding? I've had Harold on the program twice. Harold and I, we have a good time just chopping up different fights, and I think we did the Teofimo Lopez and Vasily Lomachenko fight, and we just recently actually did the Ryan Garcia and Luke Campbell breakdown. So if you listeners out there haven't heard it, go check that out. You'll really enjoy those casts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
he's like an encyclopedia of knowledge.
Oh, he is.
We have a great team. We have a great team of about 7 individuals who range from marketing to legal affairs, and our partner Joe Breadbelt, and ratings committee members. A very diverse, solid group of individuals. So you're asking about supervising?
Like what's that process?
I digressed a little bit. Supervising a title fight is basically quality control. So, for example, me and Claire have agreed, and something we feel we want everything to be fair for both boxers. So, for example, new gloves are required for both boxers with the same brand name. We supervise the weigh-in. We work with the media. We make sure that the boxer's arrangement for travel, hotel, and per diem is situated. We use unified rules of the Association of Boxing Commissions guidelines, which is generally the standard in most states. No 3 knockdown rule, cannot be saved by the bell in any round. Only referee can stop the fight. No standing 8 count. Those are the rules that I agree with for a boxing match.
Right.
So we supervise the weigh-in, the rules meeting, the glove ceremony, hand wrap. We sit next to the official scorekeeper of the commission during the bout to make sure that all scores are properly tallied per round. And I got to tell you, Mark, that a number of times I'm like, that's not how I add that score.
Oh, listen, don't get me started. Do not get me started, Jeremy, because I judge fight. I judge fights. Last night I was judging the ESPN fight, right? And I had my scorecard out. I'm digging into the fight, man. And I had the fight. I think it was like 78-74, right? And so the announcer reads the scores. He's like 78-74, 78-74, and then I'm not even gonna name the judge. All I'm gonna say is that the judge is a perpetual. I'm gonna make this a draw. I could not believe that the judge would basically call that a draw. Right? The fight that I saw as a draw, it was not a draw. I watched it impeccably and scored it according to the rules and the guidelines of scoring a professional match. And it was scored correctly. And I'm like, what is this listen, the boxing world has got to get this straight, man. We got to have great judges in there. These kids' lives are, they're putting everything they can into this. So I just love hearing you say that, and to know that you and Claire are, the ABF organization is really looking out for that. That's huge for me. I mean, that's huge for anybody in the field. Yeah, for sure.
And I can't wait for you and Harold Hunt to discuss the judging situation to some extent. That'd be a great conversation.
It is. We've discussed that several times offline, off the podcast, conversations that we had. One of the things that we have to be mindful of course, is that he holds a position as a professional judge, and those opinions could be taken out of context and maybe
professional conversation
for sure. Yeah. But exactly. I mean, listen, everybody out there in the sport, in the back inner workings of the sport, know if you've spent time in this sport, you know exactly how it works. And the one thing that we know we all can do is put a little effort on cleaning the sport up and getting some good judges in there, making sure that the people that are decision makers are making good decisions on behalf of the athletes and the teams that put this incredible work into what they do. So that's where I stand on it. That's how I stand. That's where I will stand,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, but you were saying, you were talking about supervisory and what that means, and you,
yeah, yeah, and just to describe the ABF a little bit. So that's what goes into supervising a title fight. We basically have 3 types of titles. In honoring our USA Mid-America title roots, we established regional titles, which are 6 rounds or greater, broken into 3 regions. We have the Atlantic, so your Atlantic seaboard states. We have the USA Mid-America title for the Midwest and Central U.S.
Right.
And then we have the American West title, which basically depicts the Wild West frontier sections of the nation.
Yeehaw!
Exactly. So then we have our USA title, which is 8 rounds or more, and our Continental Americas title for our more accomplished boxers. These titles, Mark, they basically represent a series of steps in a boxer's career on their path to a world championship. So we network with boxers, managers, matchmakers, promoters, and achieving opportunities for aspiring boxers to fulfill their dream of becoming a champion with an officially recognized organization like the ABF. We have designed beautiful custom-made title belts that Claire and I spent months and hours working out. We'd talk about it 3 a.m. Like, she's like, I got an idea, and I'm like half asleep, or I'd call her.
I get those calls.
And then 2 days later, what were we talking about the other night? That was a really great idea. So it's really an absolute honor to be a part of these events, and especially to be able to see the joy a boxer has when he wins the American Boxing Federation title. Our mission is to make our ABF champion feel appreciated and recognized. Most importantly, to work with our contacts and network and helping them put them into a position to better help them defend the title, as well as to do everything in our power to help and advise them on what it takes to get into the world ratings and to ultimately, hopefully, become a world champion. And there's definitely a chemistry to getting there, Mark.
Oh, for sure. It's algorithm orientated. There's so there's so many pieces that a lot of trainers and people in the field, fighters too, that they just have no idea how it all gets put together. So tell,
sure.
Why don't we? Would you mind just getting into? Well, first of all, before we get into how the rating systems actually work, and whether or not those rating systems differ based on the sanctioning body, can you just give out the ABF's? There's a web you mentioned earlier on in the cast that there's a website. Can you just give that out, or in any other social feeds that you might want to share?
We're on abfboxing.com, and you can find me if anybody out there wants to get a hold of me. I'm Jeremy, Jeremy Lance, Lantz on Facebook. You'll see our belt right behind my profile page. And we're on Facebook as well with the ABF.
Perfect. Super awesome. And then we were talking about the rating system. Share with the listeners so that they get a really good earful from you, right? From you, the president of the ABF. Tell everybody how the rating systems actually work.
Well, for major organizations like WBC, WBA, WBO, IBF, they have a purse bid rating system. So they have a ratings committee that will basically give credit to all their champions within the organization. So they may have, if you look at the WBC, for example, I don't know how many titles the WBC has. They probably have 15 to 25 titles. But basically, you'll be rated within the ladder, the organizational ladder, based on those titles, more or less. And the way it's supposed to work, more or less, is that as you fight for higher titles within the organizational ladder, you move up the ratings.
Right.
At some point, the world champion will have a purse bid for promoters to vie for the title fight, and the organization will advertise that they're having a bid on a certain date open to qualified promoters to host the title fight. So that's basically how it works for the Big Four. For all the other organizations outside the Big Four, there is not a purse bid. The ratings are simply a reflection of that sanctioning body's opinion of the qualified boxers who are being looked at by the sanctioning body for a title fight opportunity. So therefore, you are most likely going to find boxers in the ABF ratings that are not WBC regional champions or any other type of Big Four champion.
Right.
The reason for this is due to demographics. WBC, WBA, WBO, IBF, those are the Big Four. Those champions and even regional champions are generally big event promoters like Top Rank, Matchroom, PBC, Golden Boy. And that is a very important but small demographic. The ABF represents everybody else. We are the other 85 to 90%. The small town promoters in Iowa or the big promoter in Brazil. You know, I traveled 33 weekends last year. I couldn't believe I did that, but I traveled 33 weekends last year to places like Laurel, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Quincy, Massachusetts.
Poorest one. I'm sorry to hear that. That's brutal, man. Terrible. That is brutal. Like, there's a lot of fast food, junk food eating when you're doing that.
Yeah, you put on a few pounds.
For sure. That's no good, man.
Therefore, the ABF has this niche in the boxing fraternity. And you know, come to think of it, without organizations like the ABF that are officially recognized organizations, a part of the historical record, the small, mid-sized promoters will be left doing shows without these important historical titles.
Right. So that explains. You know, so is that kind of what? Let's talk a little bit about world titles and your position on world titles in the ABF.
Yeah. So the ABF, or the American Boxing Federation, at this particular moment in our development, we serve the Americas.
Right.
You know, before this, we were the USA Mid America title, so we served the U.S. Midwest for 85 to 2018. So that's a pretty long time right there. And now we've grown into the American Boxing Federation. So you can see how this has progressed. I don't know how many years it'll be before maybe there's another evolution of what we're doing. We're the American Boxing Federation, around the world, the global, the international, or the universal organization. I like everything to make sense.
Right.
So when we do title fights in Colorado, it's for the American West title, not for the Atlantic title.
Right.
You know, if we're doing a USA title, it's not being held in Mexico. You know, it's for the USA title.
Right. Interesting.
So
interesting.
And there's so much more development that we really want to delve into. We were talking with Chile before this whole thing went down. They actually had a big crisis down there before the coronavirus, which made it very difficult to do anything over there. We're trying to work with a lot of these South American, Central American nations, and even get into the Caribbean a little bit, which we plan on doing. But, we have been a part of, one of the greatest moments we've had is we were part of a showbox card featuring Sal Lopez in Oklahoma. And hopefully when things get back to normal, we'll be in the mix for things like that in the future on a regular basis.
For sure.
And Mark, just for people that don't understand the workings of a sanctioning body, or if there's promoters or managers, boxers listening, when you do a title fight, there are 3 fees associated with it. You have your belt fee, your supervisor fee, and your sanctioning fee. And we try to price our titles in a reasonable fashion, because we know that most of the promoters that we work with have a strict budget to adhere to. And the promoters cover the air and the hotel and the food, and it's basically the essentials.
Right.
So, and we have definitely noticed that whenever there's a title on the line, it definitely typically brings in more people, family and friends to the fight card, and gives a little push to the boxers when there's a big title on the line. You can really see them in the ring. They're just really going at it at a higher level.
It's also what it also is it's an incredible marketing, for any fight. Those promotions that are fighting, when fighters are fighting for belts and such, the fans love that. The fans love to know that the fighters that they're supporting are competing for, supremacy over all the other fighters in that division. So when you fight for a belt, man, you definitely gonna pack the house in ways that you normally would not pack the house. That is from a guy on the ground, a guy that works with fighters and that manages fighters, and, that nothing can be further from the truth. That is exactly how it works. That's exactly how it works.
And I always suggest, and I've seen some, in having 71 champions at this point, we've had a few that there's a lot of things that you see. They're like, wow, that was a great idea. These guys bringing in their belts into their local businesses, and they now have sponsors that are sponsoring their boxing career.
Right.
And they take pictures, and their pictures are on the wall in the restaurant or the barbershop, so they're getting there. So it's good. It's a good thing for the boxers as well, and, in a lot of cases, our title is the first title a boxer has ever won. So, you're in it to win it. Every boxer comes into our sport to be a champion. And it's really fantastic that I could be a part of something so special and personal to these gladiators, especially when they have kids in the ring, watching their parent win the belt.
Oh, man.
Honestly, that is really emotional. When you see, and generally, they're crying.
Yeah.
When their little boy looks at the belt and he sees his dad, and he's like 5 years old, and he sees his dad winning the championship belt and putting it all on the line in the ring. And you can imagine what it's like from a child's perspective to watch their father in the ring, and he's the champion. He's got the belt. Such a heroic experience for that child to see their father in a different way like that. It's just, and you see the boxer look at the child, and it's happened. So you can ask Claire when you get to talk to her. So many times, we just sit there and wait for it now.
Yeah.
The child's in the ring.
Wow.
Dad looks down at the child, or even we have some female champions with little ones, and tears fall out of their eyes. It's just instant. We know it's going to happen already. You know what I mean?
Priceless. It's priceless. It's
really emotional.
A lot of people, fight fans out there that are tuning in, that are checking out, like, this is a great podcast, but that particular point is so powerful because, these kids that grow up to be men, that fight, that are fighters, that are boxers, they are supreme athletes. They put everything on the line to do this sport. And I mean, everything, and they're just reaching for the most difficult dream to grab. And you got to give your hats off to these guys. And when you learn their stories, and that's one of the things I think that boxing doesn't do a great job at, which is sharing the stories of these fighters and who they really are, so that the audience and the people that are, supporting this sport and being involved in this sport and loving the sport really get a feeling for who these amazing men and women are. That are fighting for their lives and for their livelihoods and for their families and kids. So that story hits me so well. That's just really powerful for me. And you're right. It has to be for you one of the most rewarding moments, in what you do.
Yeah, we have a champion. His name is Matt Griego. He's over in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we were over there. And his mom was in the middle of the ring before the fight card, not before the fight card, but before his fight came on. He was the main event.
Right.
And he was getting ready to fight the hardest fight he's ever had to fight, 10-round fight against a Filipino. And the Filipinos come to fight. They're always ready to fight tomorrow. And she went in the middle of the ring, And she says to all the people, she got a microphone, and it was a sold out event. It's probably 2,500 people at one of the big casinos, the Atleta Casino in New Mexico.
Right.
And she pulls out a picture and she goes, this is his third grade picture saying that I'm going to be a champion. I'm going to have the title in boxing. He had a picture.
Wow.
Saying that he was going to do this.
Yeah.
And he went in and he very, very difficult fight, but he won the fight and he became the champion.
Right.
And, so those are, when I'm going to a town to do a fight, I know I get to meet these guys and talk with them and get to know who they are and their team. The team's so important. And, that just, I'm so excited. I can't sleep the night before I leave Tampa to go to wherever I'm going because I'm just pumped up and ready for a really amazing experience. And it always is a fantastic experience. We have an incredible network of boxers, the ABF. We've been doing this a long time now. So I feel like we've got an incredible network of boxers, promoters, matchmakers throughout the world to continue the pursuit of greater things down the road as the boxer moves up the ranks. That's one of the greatest things that comes out of this whole thing.
No, it's yeah. I just feel you so much in what you're saying, and Jeremy, so what other things, right? We're just about, at the end of the podcast, but I just wanted to ask you, what other things are you really hoping to introduce into the boxing world in the years to come?
Well, Claire and I run the ABF with a sort of peanut butter and jelly formula. So we're interested in different dynamics that come together to form something very special. She has a deep background of knowledge and network of people that are interested in the health of the boxer and concussions, dehydration, things like that. And we're also hoping to be involved with the ABC convention with some leaders in those fields and, to open up this important dialogue and discussions. She's also, so that's one thing. Another thing is she's also a fan of 3-minute rounds for important female bouts, which is something the ABF is looking to explore. I say she, but that quickly turns into we, Mark.
Right. No doubt.
From a peanut butter and jelly perspective. But, I'm interested in things like instant replay in a way that will not disrupt the flow of a match.
Interesting.
And these are the types of things that are the most important in terms of sanctioning bodies, developing the sport of boxing, new rules and regulations that led to the unified boxing rules and established 12 rounds instead of 15. Sanctioning bodies' relationships to the Association of Boxing Commissions basically led the way to many improvements in the game. So that's really paramount.
Yeah. What about open scoring?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I'd be a huge fan of that as well.
Really?
Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah. No.
Absolutely.
I'm always curious to hear who's a proponent for open scoring.
I'm a fan of it. I do realize that it would change the game a little bit, but I'm okay with that.
In what way? In what way would it change the game? So for the listeners, so they may not be fully ingrained in this conversation or understanding this conversation, but in what way?
Sure. So you're I'm thinking of the Harrison. What was that fight? Harrison and Charlo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Charlo thinks he's ahead. He's comfortable and he's fighting along and he's not changing his game plan too much. If he had known that he was down as many rounds as he was, then they would have had to turn to another plan. Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. And that could have changed go for the knockout or whatever he has to do. 9th round, he's got 3 more rounds. Try to maybe win those rounds convincingly or knock him out.
And who, this is a great conversation. This actually is a whole podcast, but like who benefits from that? like who benefits from him looking up, him and his team looking up and going, holy smokes, we're behind, man. We gotta flip the script here, right? Who benefits from that? Because as far as I'm concerned, I think the audience benefits from that. The fans benefit from him looking up and going, holy snap, I thought I was ahead, but guess what? I'm not. It's time to make some adjustments. Those adjustments could be so dynamic for the sport. And I'm sure there's another side to this story, and we could explore that on another podcast. But
judging?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes. That's it. We'll have to put that. We're going to have to put a panel together for that one. And fight fans out there, check it out. We're going to do that. We're going to put a panel together in the future, and we'll try to break down, open scoring. Like, let's just chop it up. Open scoring, right? I'm sure you'd love that. I'd love that. Right. So
absolutely. We have to evolve.
Yeah, for sure. The sport should always be looking to evolve, while paying honor to its past. It should always evolve. I'm a proponent for that as well there, Jeremy. So I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for sharing yourself with the audience and the listeners. And
thank
really,
you.
Yeah, man, this is some priceless information for the fighters out there that are really trying to get a handle on what this is all about and how it works. And, you can get more information again, by going to the abfboxing.com, and, you can find, Jeremy Lance on, Facebook, and I'm sure you're on Twitter and Instagram.
No Twitter. No Twitter. My Instagram is pretty inactive, but, I just found Instagram, but I'm an older soul, I guess.
I gotcha.
I got Facebook though.
You're an analyst for BoxRec. How are you not on Twitter? I don't get that.
Was. Yeah.
was. Pardon me. Was, yes. But still, with your
conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's a great place for your writings because you're an amazing writer and you're an amazing person to have in the sport of boxing. And I just want to thank you again. Thanks for listening in, fight fans. And with that, I want to say peace and love. Boxing fans, we are out. This is the end of another episode of the Boxing Breakdown.
Fight fans, join host Mark Roxey and special guests as they break down all aspects of the boxing world, including news, business, management, training, promotions, fan reactions, upcoming events, matchups, future boxing stars, title fights, state of the boxing world, and all the stuff you don't see when you watch boxing. This podcast is released each week on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Live streamed on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook Live. It's the Boxing Breakdown, hosted by Mark Roxey.